Welcome to the Illuminate Universe podcast, The Cast. Get it? The Cast? My name is Alina, and I'm the founder and CEO of Illuminate, where we mentor job seekers and help employers to fast-track their business goals. I interview a celebrity cast of incredible individuals who have truly inspiring careers. We're talking about their work journey, the process of taking the leap to create a life and career they love, and what happens when they push aside their fears and doubts to unleash their fullest potential. Today, we speak with Charlene Lee on entrepreneurship, the world of food and beverages industry, and skills for success. Charlene worked as a senior accountant for Deloitte, manager for TD Bank, before founding the world's most delicious and cool gourmet popcorn, infused with the flavors of classic cocktails, wine, and spirits. Non-GMO, gluten-free, and artisan crafted with natural ingredients. A refined snacking experience worthy of your everyday celebrations. Hi, Charlene. Thank you so much for coming on to our show today. Our first question for you is, can you share a bit more about your entrepreneurial story with us? How did you enter the world of entrepreneurship, and how did you come up with EATABLE?
Well, in my past life, I was actually a professional accountant. So I went through school and did my undergrad studies in commerce, ended up articling at one of the large accounting firms in Canada and received the CPA designation. So I spent the first 10 years or so of my career just within the finance world. After leaving an accounting firm, I ended up working for one of the large banks in Canada as well. So going through that time, I had always enjoyed my career, but I always felt like in a way there was something missing. So I've always sort of considered myself as somebody who was adept with numbers, but also had these creative talents in the background. So after a couple of years in my career, I actually planned our own wedding. So when I was going through the wedding planning process, I fell in love with the idea of designing our wedding invitations and stationery. And I was sort of a self-taught graphic designer. And that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. After planning my own wedding and doing our own wedding invitations, I was sort of sitting in my corner office, at a bank doing financial stuff all day long and then moonlighting on weekends with like a binder of paper swatches in coffee shops. And it did pretty well for a couple of years. We got published in a couple of high profile wedding magazines. But then I had my first child and it became really difficult to keep up with custom work for very demanding clients, I would say, who are planning one of the milestone moments of their lives. So I sort of put a pause on that. But because I had sort of done it once, it got those creative juices going. And I literally couldn't imagine myself sitting in an office for another 30 years of my career. And I had this sort of like little moment of panic. I can recall the day it happened. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I have to give this a go. Like, I feel like I have to jump out and maybe explore some creative realms in my life. And so that kind of kickstarted a whole series of events that it resulted in us like relocating to Boston, picking up and leaving Toronto, where my husband and I were both born and raised. And during our time in Boston, I was working with another startup and we came across a commercial kitchen that happened to run an accelerator or incubator program that really taught people the ins and outs of running a food business from end to end. So on a personal level, my husband and I have always been foodies. During our dating days, we'd go check out all the trendy restaurants in Toronto. So we've always had an appreciation for good food and drink. And then during our time in Boston, we kind of just stumbled in that community kitchen, thinking it was like a hobby, a way to meet people in the city. After coming out that incubator program, there was a little pitch competition where we entered in a popcorn recipe that we had actually been making for a number of years on our kitchen stove, not thinking anything of it. And it was a Scotch infused whiskey infused caramel popcorn. And literally, this recipe was just something we read out of a recipe book on how to make handcrafted caramel on the stovetop. And we just decided to spice it up a little bit by pouring some Scotch whiskey in it. And that popcorn won top two in that pitch competition in front of a panel of retail buyers, people in the food industry. And that was kind of that next eureka moment where we thought, maybe this idea kind of has legs and we should see where we can go with it. It felt like a really impulsive decision in a way, but I have always been of the thought, I don't want to live my life with regret. My husband feels the same way. Life is short, and the last thing we wanted to do was kind of sit and wait in an office, and we wanted to find that fulfillment. And so this was that opportunity where we're like, let's just do something with it. So we packed our bags and moved back to Toronto and to be closer to our family, and launched Eatable out of here.
That is so incredible, so inspirational. It all seems like it's meant to be. But while you were going through the journey, did you ever, stop and wonder, I wonder if this was meant to be? Was it a natural journey? Did you ever think it was going to happen before it happened?
Not really. I don't think either of us really went through business school and thought, hey, I'm gonna make popcorn when I'm done with this. Seriously, I graduated thinking that I was gonna be making a career in finance my whole life. I mean, that was a very important cornerstone, I would say, in our education, and spending those years in a corporate environment, I would say laid the foundation for the confidence that it took to kind of take this kind of leap and move outside the corporate world. But it wasn't a natural thing at all. The first couple of years were very challenging. We constantly reevaluated our identity. Like, what are we doing with ourselves? What are we doing? And you would tell friends and family, and they're like, oh, that's nice. Like, is it a side gig? And we're like, no, I think we could, really push the idea of wine and spirits infused popcorn that we make with natural ingredients out into the market, and people would take us seriously. But in those early days when nobody saw us on any sort of shelf and we just threw up a Shopify store, people were kind of giving us, okay, that's nice. I'll buy you for holiday gifts and stuff, but they didn't really think anything of it until maybe half a year down the road, and we had our first opportunities to land our products in some major national retailers in Canada, like large department stores. Did people then start to see, oh, I think they're kind of onto something? But in the beginning, no one really believes it until they see it. And there's this really big sense of that underdog story that kind of has to motivate you to get through those really hard days. So yeah, it didn't really come easy at all.
That's funny. So tell us about the underdog story. Tell us about a setback you've encountered in your life and how it served you throughout this whole journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, like as I said, when we first launched, we just threw up a Shopify store. Those initial orders, I still remember the names of our first initial customers. The first customer was actually my dad, but I don't know if that counts. But the first, handful of customers, like they mean something to you. Every single order would validate the fact that there's someone out there interested enough to buy it. And so we launched right in the beginning of 2019. That was a time that the world was your oyster. And then until COVID-19 hit that year, did we really get thrown in the trenches. Starting a business is hard enough. Starting a business within a very competitive consumer packaged goods space as a food supplier is even tougher. Pair that with, retail closures, halts at the grocery stores on sampling and all of that. And that really early in our business trajectory already, we were forced to adapt and pivot. Luckily, we had created a foundation within e-commerce to help kind of ground that basis. And that was at a time when all of the large retailers were finding a way to move back online. But those were some really trying times. We had already kind of invested a lot of personal capital into this business. And to read those news articles every day about how small shop owners were closing, that took a really, really big toll on myself. And it really made apparent that, you can start something with stars in your eyes, but there's going to be some really low times. And that's not even in the midst of a global pandemic. So I would say, there were some pretty low points again, like when you're looking at money in your bank account and my husband and I work together. We live together. We're life partners too. So even that brought its own set of challenges with, two little kids at home. I think that a really big struggle, like particularly going past into these 2 years, was that mental health aspect of it. And that imposter syndrome. At a time when everyone's looking for stability, are you really going to start a business in this time? Is this what you really want to do with your life? Should one of us go back to work? Navigating that instability, I would say, in the economy and the whole landscape really did take a toll on my mental health. And it's not something that people really talk about that much within entrepreneurship. It's a lot of times it's like very isolating and lonely going through these journeys, feeling like, your friends and your networks around you who are, in corporate jobs and they don't really understand. Your really good friends will really support you throughout that journey and reach out to you and see how you are. But a lot of times it was very isolating. So we only had each other, it seemed like, for a while. And even then, we didn't always get along. To overcome that, I had to get to a place where I had to be okay admitting like I needed to find a therapist, perhaps. So, I mean, personally, I really enjoy speaking about mental health and the impact mental health has on entrepreneurship. I think is very important. It affects all of us, not just entrepreneurs. A lot of people went through some really hard times during those years. I'm glad to see now coming out of it, there is more and more discussion happening around this topic and more resources that came out of the pandemic meant to make it okay and reduce that stigma. But that self-awareness, I think, that comes with going through those hard times is something that makes you a stronger person coming out of it, entrepreneurship or not. We're all people and we all need connection. And so I feel like we came out of that with that raised awareness that business and life is all about people and it's about taking care of yourself. And so you need to make time to take care of yourself to be better for people in your life. It was both a personal and a business lesson for myself. We wear so many hats as a co-founding team of two, and we had a family to raise. So I think that was a very challenging time in our lives that, I can look back on like in a weird way, like fondly now, because it taught me a lot of hard lessons that I probably wouldn't have otherwise learned in the same way. So I feel like that's built up my tolerance, going forward, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And so if you had a time traveling machine and you went back to, let's say, 2020 March, what would you say to Charlene then? What kind of tips
Like,
would you have for her?
brace yourself for impact.
I love that.
I would tell myself there's going to be a lot of days where you kind of really question if your head is in the right place. And you're going to doubt yourself a lot in this journey. But I think it's all about grit and it's all about resilience. I would not like to think that I'm like the smartest person in the room in any room that I enter. I mean, there's been so much learning in this journey because I didn't come with a professionally trained food background. I didn't know how things worked previous to this in the industry. So I would say, as long as you have grit, as long as you stay in the game and keep pivoting, keep moving forward, you won't lose. A lot of people tell me they're really scared to jump into entrepreneurship because you're evaluating what you're giving up, like joining in that world, right? You're like, oh, I got this nice steady career and everything's good. And people in my peer group are doing so well in their corporate journeys. And then you're like, at what point do I feel like it's okay to jump out of this secure state into a life of entrepreneurship? I told a couple of people I've spoken with over the years, I'm like, we thought that corporate was safe, but the pandemic taught us that it's not really, or people had to be open to change, right? When one industry got hit really hard, retail, hospitality, events got hit so hard, people had to be open to change and evolution. What I studied in school may not necessarily be what I end up doing in life. And our company actually found a way to take what was going on and use it to pivot and grow along with what was actually happening. So we'd always taken pride in our products being very gourmet, and we always wanted to push the boundaries in terms of flavor profiles to kind of take it a step up from what typical popcorn in the marketplace looked like. So when we had an opportunity to bring on a chef in our team that ended up being furloughed from, a large hotel job, we were like, yes, we need help. We need help making more popcorn and bringing fresh ideas into what new flavors we can roll out. Because in the beginning, we had our stuff tested by pastry chefs and sommeliers that really validated that. But at the end of the day, my husband Vince and I don't have a food background. Like what I think tastes good, I think tastes good, but I want to make sure that somebody else or our customers also think it tastes good. So we took what was bad in the economy and we found a way to kind of work with it and help us build our team during that challenging time. So yeah, just be open to change and adapt, I would say.
That's incredible. And so, given the interesting times that we're in, what is one piece of advice you would offer to someone currently striving to attain their dream job?
I think it goes back to what I was saying before, and be open to change, be open to adaptability, because I find that a lot of times we as humans and crave stability in our lives, especially in uncertain times. And we have a tendency to try and plan what the ideal version of our life and career looks like. And I think while planning is super, super important, sometimes when you're so fixated on your thought on what a perfect life and a perfect career looks like or a perfect job, you might miss other things that come at you that are not completely in line with that. So I would say, when you're evaluating a position in a career, sometimes people are like, I have to work for such and such company. And I'd be like, what? That's there's no guarantee that all the stars are going to go align and you're absolutely going to get a job in that company. What I would focus more so on is what are the skills that you're hoping to develop in your career? And how can skills that you're taking with you from a previous job translate into something you can apply to another job? You can look at sort of the course of your career as something that's building your personal brand or a personal toolbox of skills that can take you anywhere you want to go, no matter what the industry, no matter what the company. So don't get so fixated on what you think you want, but just be open to what comes at you in life and just be prepared to grab those opportunities when they do come.
Last question for you, Charlene. So, how do you balance everything? You're a mother, you're an entrepreneur.
I don't think balance actually exists in my repertoire, to be honest. Yeah, we wear so many hats. This particularly hit me hard during the pandemic, as I explained before, just during really hard times. I had a mentor tell me a while ago that you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time. And I really took that to kind of evaluate how I spend my time in my life, because if it were up to me and I had 10 years of my life back with no kids yet, I would be the type that's working the midnight oil, staying up till 4 a.m. on my computer, doing everything, grinding it out until you get to do what you want, right? But actually having children, it sort of showed me in a really hard way that just because you want to do something, you can't do it. You're going to have physical limitations. You're going to have constraints on your energy level and your sleep. And I found myself in the early days with my son when he was just months old, figuring out how to be productive in like a 45-minute window where he's napping. And so that kind of taught me, you can't be so fixated on like doing everything in one sitting. You can't be the perfect mom and the perfect boss and everything. Truly, I think that women have to make a lot of tough choices in their lives and be very intentional about what parts of your life you're prioritizing at any given time. So I sort of ended up structuring my week in such a way that I made sure that there were enough buckets of time in my week so that I could provide even coverage to different facets of my life, whether it's, being in the home, at work. I kind of live and die by my calendar a little bit. It seems a little crazy, but it works. And it was the only way that I felt comfortable that I'm giving enough attention to the various different facets of my life. And it required a lot of discipline, to be honest, to be very intentional about blocking that time out and then drawing boundaries between, if I'm at home, I'm at home and I'm present with my kids. So no devices, no cells. But when they're asleep and I open up my computer, I don't need to feel guilty that I'm, not spending time with them. So I think it's just the intentional scheduling of that time that makes me feel a little bit better about balance. But I don't think I've truly ever felt at any point in my life I'm doing it all very well anyway.
Well, you're certainly a role model for myself. You're teaching me how to step into the world of entrepreneurship and perhaps in a decade how to become a mom, or who knows, maybe in a couple of years. I'm not sure. Well, the first thing is I need to find a boyfriend.
I'm sure you'll have no problem with that. No problem at all. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Charlene, for being on our show. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Alina. And I'm in so much awe of what you've done to create the Illuminate community as well, and everything that it just does for this market. And I think it's even more important now than ever to provide that link between people in the job world as well, and give them these resources to even help decide where they want their career to go. So hats off to you as well. Thanks for having me.